Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ILSoyAdvisor. I'm Kelsey Litchfield from West Central Illinois with storms a coming tonight. We'll see how that all comes about. Lots of corn and soybeans emerge, so I'm hoping not to see a lot of hail or too much wind. They're calling for a lot of wind, so I guess time will tell with that. But today we're going to talk crop progress and field conditions with Stephanie Porter and Abigail Peterson of the Illinois Soybean Association. But before we get into that, real quick, I like to do a little snippet of the crop progress for the week. So for the week ending May 19th, 67% of the corn crop has been planted, which a significant increase. Last week was 42%, so a lot of planters were able to get in the fields, though still slightly below the 5-year average of 71%. On a positive note, corn emergence is ahead of schedule at 49% compared to the 5-year average of 44. Soybean planting has reached 58%, up from 39% last week, slightly above the 5-year average of 56%. Soybean emergence is at 31%, ahead of the 5-year average of 29%. Winter wheat headed reached 90% compared to the 5-year average of 74%. And then winter wheat condition was rated mostly at 49% good, 21% excellent, and 18% fair. Illinois Wheat Association has their plot tour this week, so we'll be hearing more about those conditions here in Illinois later on. So with that, what are you seeing as you travel the state? We were talking about before we hit record, a lot of farmers getting that corn crop in. They put beans to the side, getting the corn crop in. Is that what you're seeing across the board?
Yeah, I guess I'm more towards the northern part of Illinois. I reside in Bureau County and travel a bit from Bureau to down here in Bloomington. And overall, that once that Mother's Day weekend hit, it seemed like planters were going as much as they could in the fields, and majority, I would say, have been going in and have finished up in our area. But corn, I mean, there's stuff that's just spiking to, got its third leaf on. So I'd say it's all over the board from when you got in. Same for soybeans. But for the majority of soybeans, they're all pretty small. I mean, V1, V2 at most. But stuff that got in around April 15th to 18th, it's coming up okay. But I would say it's been wrapping up near northern Illinois and western.
So I would say for Southern Illinois, it's not wrapping up. They've been extremely wet in the South. Been hearing from multiple people across the state. I think, stress levels are really high. And I agree with Abigail. There were some people, and we did our spotting in our replant on Mother's Day weekend. And Karen Corrigan always is notorious about talking about the Mother's Day massacre, if you haven't heard about it. So anyway, that was a lot of times in the years past, people have had issues with replant after Mother's Day with storms coming. And so there was talk about that on Twitter, and then it rained again, like it did, but I feel like a lot of people have been just talking about different, I don't know what you would call it, a spurt, where they have just a few days, a very narrow window, that they can get in the field. And so there's been a lot of overnight type of planting, just trying to get things done, and then maybe even doing the second round of replanting. And so, as you know, things are all over the board in growth stages. And the other thing, just recently I heard, because you mentioned wheat. So the wheat is ahead of schedule, and will be ready sooner than later. And so just think about those that have wheat further south, and they're still trying to plant, they're still trying to spray. And then on top of that, the wheat's going to be ready. And then some of those, I mentioned a friend I had animals too on top of that. So there's a lot going on there on the farm this season, with everything kind of escalating. I guess what I would say the hot topic is, at least on our farm, were the weeds coming really quick. And so it's like, what do you do? Do you want to go in and plant? We had some replant, And then my brother posted the corn already, the early planted corn, I should say, the April planted corn. So that was the recent thing where the water hemp, where did it come from? It just came out of nowhere. We had some other weeds as well. So
yeah, definitely seeing more sprayers on the road from last weekend, which is good because yeah, most fields I've walked, especially those field entrances, weeds have been definitely popping up to about 2 inches, 4 inches now. So that would be a big concern.
So what's next for weed management? What would be any recommendations? Keep scouting, keep looking at it to look at those applications. Anything else?
Yeah.
Abigail, I'll let you go first since I just rambled
Well,
on.
yeah, usually the post, is pretty important to get under control. Because that when those weed escapes happen, I mean, it's going to be a game with the replant. We still have those big ponds area that need to probably be spotted in, but they hold on to the moisture the most. So it's like clay out there. And to spot in even you can't even get replanted, and that's where your big escapes are going to happen in those wet holes that don't have any cash crop growing. So yeah, I'd be concerned, get your post in, and then a lot of the fields that I walk are cover crop fields, and love them or hate them this year. I've seen about all over the board as far as early termination, small growth to all the way shoulder high, headed out, big biomass. So it's kind of across the board. And I think actually the larger biomass fields that have cover crop now are still not planted because of that moisture retention, and wanting to, if you have those big cover crop fields with cereal rye going into beans, mainly you want to plant and spray after, spray the day of. You don't want to be getting to a situation where you spray too early, and having it sit with a dead wet mat out there. So I've passed quite a few fields. I go through Hennepin on my way down to Bloomington, and there's quite a few they're not wheat fields. They're those cereal rye fields up here. And I've twisted the arm of some farmers to help me out to leave some areas to roll the cereal rye versus non-rolled. And that's where I'm really interested in to see how much advantage you can take when you roll that biomass down. We recommend to chemically terminate, and then get it rolled with a land roller crimper, not necessarily needing the crimper if you're not using it to kill. Even rolling baskets that you have on the back of tillage equipment. We've seen cultipackers, we've seen pretty much everything under the sun with that has weight to it to get it knocked down. And we do see an advantage, but as what I'd like to see is, what stage can you roll over that bean and to not make an impact to stressing the bean? When is elongation really an issue? Because I see plenty of fields that have waist high cereal rye. Those beans elongate a little bit and it really doesn't cause any problems. So that's one lookout this year. I had some non-GMO fields that have cover crops that are going to be a concern for making sure we keep those weeds under control. But for early termination this year, the biggest concern was cover crop regrowth. So either farmers plant or sprayed, and luckily the farmers I work with are more than happy to tell me their mistakes, because a lot of them mentioned that it was probably too cold when they went out and sprayed too early. That really being the big one, but we also highly look out for tank mixes. So I work with Jim Iserman very closely, and he's my go-to to make sure that when you hear of tank mixes nowadays have a lot of different names, and you got to drill down to the, is it metribuzin? Is it, where is it glyphosate? What is flowing in that mix? Because a lot of it can cause antagonism and cause an issue with termination of the cover crop. So a lot of those calls, so you don't usually look for, because if you use that tanks mix before, you're probably just not thinking about it, or not seeing it as a big concern. So that termination for me this year for cover crops has been a huge call out on if it's caused issues or if it's been a success. Because now a lot of cover crops fields that we are seeing now with weed control, the cover crops are doing a pretty good job. on some areas of just being able to hold off some and delay some of that emergence for your water hemp. And you know, a lot of the winter annuals that we had this year, you probably saw purple fields of henbit. You know, cover crops did a good job of suppressing some of those winter annuals.
I guess just to add to that, the only thing, I think I sent a picture of our April planted corn to Abigail and Kelsey. I think that was Friday, and they're like, "Whoa," you know, like, and I was shocked because I wish I had more time to scout, but I try to hit it once a week, and I couldn't. Had grown 2 growth stages. Well, just think how much the weeds are growing with this heat. And so that's the other thing that's on my radar is, you know, we usually want to pay attention to weed height with labels, and that water hemp is growing like crazy. And so that's just something to watch out for.
So on the planting side of things, that was a good update of what's going on, field conditions, weeds, cover crop terminations. Now flipping over, those farmers are still trying to get in the field. Stephanie, you wrote a blog, kind of a late season soybean planting checklist. You and Abigail just want to go through that, some things for farmers to keep in mind. We talked earlier, if they got the corn crop in, now turn their attention back to the beans. What should be front of mind for those farmers that are getting that crop in?
So I think this is easier said than done. And I've heard a lot of other agronomists say this, and we can't forget to say it, is even though it's late, we still want the field conditions to be right. I've been getting a lot of pictures from our soy envoy, Kelly Robertson, of driving past fields, and he has videos where you can see the compaction of wheels in the South. And that's going to be evident throughout the whole season. And of course, we talk about sidewall compaction and yada, yada. We've talked about that on previous podcasts. I think that's first and foremost. And I guess when we start planting later, it's often recommended to increase your seeding rate. When you start hitting June, I don't think we're quite there yet. The only call out would be those who like to cut back on their, you know, pops, maybe do 140,000 now, bump it a little bit. But also I would check, you know, if you're not familiar with your variety, if you want to, you know, check with your seed agronomist. If it's a bushier variety, you know, you may not want to have to push the pop as much. But as you get into June, a general recommendation by extension folks is to start bumping up that population a bit. I would say it's not a promise of more yield. It just helps you to get some more nodes out there, which helps you get more leaves, in turn, hoping more pods, more light interception, that type of thing. But I think we've had some double crop research going on in the north a little bit, just one field this past year. So I don't want to, you know, talk about it too much, but they didn't necessarily see a yield increase all the time when they bumped pops. So that's just something to think about. And then I guess another question, comment is about row spacing. We definitely are going to want to get that canopy up quicker. Weed scientists like to say that the population won't get your canopy up quicker. It's more row spacing. So that's going to help with the weeds in turn, and that type of thing. And then I guess the other question that I usually get asked, or sometimes get asked, especially the further north you go, is should you switch your soybean maturity? And not necessarily until you get to maybe mid-June for those northerners. Especially in the South, we usually go with a full maturity for double crop. So that's definitely not an issue. But not a concern at this time.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I would be concerned, anyone with a tall cover crop right now, definitely utilize try, usually, hopefully farmers that are using cover crops in this manner either started slow and just did a couple of fields, or are well experienced in these types of sprayings. But if you're brand new to it, you have a tall cereal rye crop going into soybeans, I would recommend maybe trying to knock it down. And then talking with some other agronomists, it's a big call out with farmers who aren't familiar with corn in front of a grass cover crop. And if that grass cover crop got a little bit further along than you thought, something like triticale, barley, or cereal rye, make sure you talk about nitrogen management with your agronomist, and make sure you got everything sorted for utilization up front, because you're going to be suffering quite a bit if you didn't get if you got more of a biomass than you thought. You want to make sure you're supplementing that nitrogen. And then walking fields now, I'm very curious. I learn a lot after it's done, so I'll know what to say once once we figure it out. Because some fields right now are, the bean leaf beetles are out. I want to get more into what the life cycles are going to look like for insects this year. Kelly Estes, Nick Sider are our go-to researchers here at ISA and at U of I, that really help guide what you should be looking for in life cycle emergence. Because when you think of weather, that's the first thing that pops into my mind, is the weeds coming in earlier, and then what's it going to look like for insect damage, just because if they're getting an earlier start, they have a longer life cycle, they can have more generations. Then you have a crop that is fully, at a V3, and you got one that's just emerged, what's going to be the impacts on feeding. So they're big call outs, and I've seen quite a bit of bean leaf beetle feeding recently. But once you get your little chart out and you look at 30% versus 20%, 15%, defoliation, it's not as bad as you think, and it grows out of it pretty quickly. So it's more just observational, but definitely going to be on the lookout for the agronomist here at ISA.
And are you still hearing more black cutworm feedings?
So I was just going to comment on that. So I was kind of like, when I scouted and I had V4 corn, that's about the cutoff of where you really don't have to start worrying about it anymore. But on the other hand, the later planted corn is more apt to get it, especially in those weedier fields. So with the higher catches across the state of the cutworm moths, I'd be, still out there looking, scouting, remembering you can get maybe a little control if the seed treatment's still there. And also with your BT hybrids, but still be aware that they can do some major damage, especially coming into some of those weedier fields that we've had this year. So be on the lookout. And I've been hearing about bean leaf beetles too. So the good news is the later planted fields of soybeans are missing out. Probably will miss out on that. But they'll have other insects to worry about. I'm sure the later season insects, like stink bug, grasshopper, and maybe we could see aphids again, possibly resurface up north again. We'll see.
Well, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, and I did want to call out, I still have a passion for strip till. I keep seeing more strip till beans, especially into the cover crop. And sometimes it's hard to quantify, at this stage, if you're getting an advantage or if you're getting mellower ground to plant into, what that moisture control is. But I gotta say, I keep looking at those strip till fields and really liking the advantages. And so, as we look into trials at ISA, we're definitely looking back into strip till beans. I think it's been done before. People phased in and out of it, but a lot of them have been coming back, especially Northern Illinois, where we got more 30-inch rows with our white mold issues up here. Makes more sense on the bean side when you got the WIS matching up. But very, very happy with strip till fields this year.
So we've talked about weeds, we've talked about insects. What about disease? I know, Stephanie, on your crop report, you said no sightings yet, which is good news. I know in our past Soy Envoys recording, there was talk about, you talked about soybean blight. What's the status there? Just nothing as of yet, but what to be aware of, I guess.
I mean, I think at this point in time, and I know it's cooler up north, but I mean, we still, we're just planting. We're looking at those seed treatments to work, hopefully, if they do. And just with this warmer weather, you know, Pythium, we can still see at different temperatures. So it's not just a cool weather disease, but the Phytophthora, I still am concerned about, especially with there being possible, you don't call it resistance, but basically, some pathivars, um, you know, existing still that may overcome some of the genes that we have in our varieties. So just kind of a watch out there, early season wise. But other than that, really, I think with this warm weather that we are especially having in South Central Illinois, things are growing so fast you can hear them. And so that's good with pests and diseases. So we want good growing conditions and hoping for the best. I'm kind of keeping my eye on the corn. It doesn't look yellowish. I think there's been some concerns raised about nitrogen, which Abigail brought that up. So that's a good point. And I think with the strip till, that gives guys opportunities to add some more, possible nutrients in furrow, to a point without injuring. And then I think, people are maybe possibly side dressing, and thinking about nitrogen, but as a whole, I just don't think, especially where we are, in the darker soils, we haven't really seen any type of lighter corn where I would think that it, is struggling with nitrogen at all. If all, I've more so of a striping with sulfur. So something we're going to think about doing on our farm more so is, putting sulfur out. So
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I like to look for it, so I haven't seen it, and I try pretty hard to look for diseases, because I like sending photos and, and causing an uproar. So I'm looking and haven't seen anything, but I will preface, most of my fields I walk are soybeans, and most of them were that April 15th, 18th range that they were planted. So I don't have a lot of variety yet in my field scouting other than my routine ones, but they've fallen under that category and they're looking great.
Good. So we won't talk about it anymore to cause more of an uproar. Okay, my last question for you guys is talking about replanting. You said some of these fields that have these wet areas might need spotted in. I was seeing a lot of wet fields on my way to Indiana this past weekend, near the Danville area, and they got some more rain as we were heading back. So, what's your message, advice to farmers that are looking at replanting?
It's hard to scout fields with big wallows out there. I call them buffalo wallows. Because they're just gonna get overrun with weeds. They're ugly to look at. If putting in beans or corn that late into the game, for an advantage, it's more of just aesthetics at that point, and you're you're just not wanting to have those gaps in the field. So, it is what it is. Yeah, just to get something out there for something growing, and to eventually have residue. I mean, it's just a pain in the butt. And depending on what you got to go spot in, if you got a little drill or if you got something that you could hook up real fast to go not run over much of the crop, might be worth it. But man, do those buffalo wallows, they take the longest to dry out. So it's a crapshoot. And my dad's known to just take the bean hook out there, and we'll just be out there all summer whacking away at the, water hemp that's as tall as I am. And what's the solution? I don't know if I've got it, but yeah, I think guys are just going to be evaluating how much they want to run over that crop to get into those holes out there. At this point, though, we got geese, we got deer, everything's eating the beans. So I think population's an interesting conversation. I'd like to talk to more farmers trying to figure out population prescriptions, or if they're trying different things for different fields on population and trying to get ahead of the game there. But I don't know, Stephanie, got any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, we just spotted in on Mother's Day, we had the opportunity. I would say, especially with corn, we were really concerned with not possibly getting back in for, at that time, I mean, there was kind of panic. It might be the end of this month. And so we were talking about how to switch a maturity up maybe a bit on corn, because we just had a 115-day. So that's something to talk to your seed agronomist about as you spot in. And I guess it just takes me back to 2019, where we were really concerned, and I was writing about something I never wrote about in my career, which was fallow syndrome, where you want to make sure there's some plants growing on there, for sure. And so it got to be so late, which I don't think we're there yet, but it just got to be so late. We didn't want to have those big, you don't want to leave bare spots out there. You want to have some some plants, and even, I mean, weeds do help. We don't want weeds, but anything out there, just so we don't have, you know, that'll affect your crop the next year or the coming years. So I think that's why people were actually trying to get out there and plant something there. And it wasn't necessarily for yield. It was just more so to make sure you didn't have a fallow spot that could cause issues the following year. So that's my only thoughts on replant, but it's just been crazy. And like Kelsey said, we've got more nasty weather coming in, which I don't want to say this word, but we always have the hail watch out too. We had hail last year. And that's why we have crop insurance, of course, but there's always that concern as well.
I was just about to say, Kelly Robinson, one of our soy envoys, recommended a couple weeks back, if you're not in the fields, take your crop insurance guy out to lunch and have a conversation with him or her. So might not be a bad idea to just have conversations about that if it comes to that point. Can't control Mother Nature, so who knows what's to come, and how we'll end out this month of May weather-wise too. Anything else that's on top of mind that we haven't mentioned?
I think you hit everything.
I think you did too. I'm just excited to be outside looking at fields. I mean, the weather's been, like Stephanie said, that it's growing fast. So it seems like every time you're out, even at the same field, it's changed quite a bit. So I think that's exciting. I'll be excited for, more of the summer events to get going and to hear what farmers are doing. Because yeah, there's a lot of different avenues, and it seems like wet springs and things, cold and then gets hot. There's a lot to learn still. So it's just exciting to get out and talk with farmers on what they're seeing too. But
I'm heading to Richland. Is there anything I need to check out at the plot, Abigail?
And you can always make it a learning experience. So weed ID might be the might be the plot this year, because there's a lot of weeds, and that they don't have a problem growing.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think one common message I'm hearing across the board, crop scouting is always important, but it seems this year it's very important to get out in those fields, look around, write down your observations. Don't just think you can remember them. Write them down on your phone and keep those notes as the season progresses.
Yeah, get out behind that planter, because this year, especially, sidewall compaction, down pressure, things that were probably adjustable, but also soil conditions you got to be really aware of. And I think you'd learn a lot after the fact if you just get out and walk some fields on emergence and what you're seeing population wise right now. You can go out and look at some populations and evaluate, and see pretty clearly on the dates planted which ones actually look probably better than the others. And so I've been doing a lot of that recently, but beans are fun. You can have a great population and then, fall between 90 and 80 and still work out pretty good. So that's what we're doing, a lot of population counts now.
Thank you for hopping on today. We'll keep these updates going. Abigail, it's so good to hear from you. We usually have our soy envoys come in, but since I was out Thursday, we said let's get Stephanie and Abigail together, see what they've been seeing out in the fields, and I think we covered a lot. So thank you for coming on, and we'll have you on maybe again in June, and we can keep this going to see what you're finding out in the fields.
Yeah, it's fun. No, thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you.